personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. This is the Data Diva Talks Privacy podcast, where we discuss data privacy issues with industry leaders around the world with information that businesses need to know now. I have a special guest on the show, Vivek Kumar. He is the Assistant Vice President of Data Protection at EXL Service Holdings, LLC. Welcome.
Hey, thank you, Debbie. Thank you for hosting me today.
Yeah. Well, this is great. We've been trying to get this together for quite some time, and I'm glad we were able to get you on the show. You and I are connected on LinkedIn. We've been connected on LinkedIn for many years. You would actually call me up and ask me to participate with you in a presentation that happened to your corporation around data privacy, data protection, how to do robust programs and things like that. And I thought you'd be a really great person to talk to. I think, there are a lot of people in the audience who probably work at corporations where some of their duties fall into this realm. So really being able to talk to someone like you, I think would be very beneficial. So why don't you tell me about your journey? How did you get to where you are in your career now?
Oh, so that's an interesting question. So I had started my career more towards GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, towards managing a lot of ISO and information security management system standards, and a bit of data protection aspect. But then when in 2000, I would say 16, when the world is wake up towards GDPR regulation, I think one of the key project has given to me to handle this project of implementing GDPR across company. And that's where the starting where my privacy journey has started. And I think I was one of the few pilot members in the company to implement GDPR at full scale, end to end, across the globe. So yes, that's how privacy is scaled to my now DNA. Where now, if I look at back the next few years, I think over a period of time, the privacy as a subject, as a domain, has evolved a lot. Globe is getting a lot of interaction towards growing regime of data privacy, where every country is just trying to enforce and enact the privacy regulations. And I think a lot of standards are being drafted and came up in the industry. So yes, that's the journey started and it's still going on.
That's great. I think, especially in the US, I remember when the GDPR law was passed in May 25th, 2016. And I thought, I'm going to wake up in the morning, everybody's going to care about privacy. It's like no crickets, right? Like nothing happened. No one was really thinking about it. So it's great that you were thinking about it then, you were working on it then, because it's definitely come a huge issue now. Tell me a little bit about AI. So AI has taken over the privacy conversation, I feel, and maybe we need to hitch our wagon on AI of sorts to get some stuff done here, especially on the regulation space. But tell me how just the topic of AI has changed what you do or touched it in some way.
No, absolutely. I think I was just expecting this question. So AI, I think over the last, I would say 1 year, gained a lot of noise why world is trying to catch up with GPT, and then a lot of regulator and a lot of standard now trying to get involved with how do we complying AI sort of technologies. I think one of the key aspects I look at, Debbie, is still, I think AI is not a new thing, and the principles of AI is still carries and valid to our existing data privacy regulations and regimes. So I think a lot of work yet to be done, but same time, I would say company has their existing program which required enhancement towards getting to AI principles. So I was in conference in Washington, D.C. recently, and I think in IAPP. And I think that this is the most hot topic where I think industry leaders are trying to get together and trying to make universal consent towards how do we implement a responsible AI framework. And I think now the way you look at the companies are coming up with AI policies. I think that's the first step, where policy of in the form of acceptable uses of AI, policy in the form of framework towards managing AI-led solutions, maybe, and the process in the form of doing a strong risk assessment and risk assurance towards AI. I think the way I'm looking is how do we, one is enhanced existing program of data privacy towards AI, or then what are the additional tools, technology, skill set we need to bring into the team. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I'm seeing three different ways companies are addressing this. One is the companies, they're assuming their organization is a castle. So let's close the gate and close our eyes, pretend like AI isn't there, and go on business as usual. The other side of the spectrum is that people are just going totally out, gangbusters for AI, and they're not really thinking about the risk. And then I feel like this middle group where they're trying to say, okay, AI is there. How are we as a company gonna actually use it or not? Because I feel like, first of all, I don't think abstinence is gonna work, right? Say, oh, just don't use it. Like that's not gonna work, right? And then I also think that even if companies like Apple basically say, okay, we're gonna shut off these external AIs, but we're gonna create our own. Like we're seeing a lot of that happen. So, what are your thoughts about all these three approaches?
I think absolutely right, because like whether you talk about Apple or Microsoft, the AI chatbot which is being built and solution which is being is still with a lot of questions. I was just recently looking at Microsoft Copilot. I think they says and they mention in the website that it uses black box, but the fundamental question is, do we have a transparency mechanism built into the black box? Tomorrow somebody questions it, and how this black box taking decisions and doing profiling, and then but when you ask those questions, you don't have answer right now. So I think the way we are still building the solution, trying to help our customer, but at the same time, I think how the rights of individual needs to be protected, and towards these risks to the exposure of data, that also same time need to be looked at very rigorously. And moreover, the way I am looking at it is just, and I think we'll come to that subject in a few minutes, that accountability is more important. Building more and more transparency in your policy procedure, the way you're collecting data, the way you're building solutions, and I think building those transparency where you are able to explain how the AI chatbot taking decisions and then what data is being used. So yeah, there are still a lot of talks.
I love that. And I agree. Let's talk about accountability. So, I think what these AI tools are doing, whether people realize or not, is that it's shifting the risk to the organization. And so there has to be accountability. So you can't just say, oh wow, the AI did this thing. I don't know what happened. And they're like, well, what happened? I don't know. It just magically happened. It's like, no, that's just not gonna work. So what are your thoughts about building in accountability, especially you talked about transparency, but I feel like what we're lacking in this AI discussion is that there needs to be accountability and responsibility from the beginning to the end of that data lifecycle. What are your thoughts?
I look at two ways. One is, do we have a set of guidelines, standard regulations to build this accountability? And on the other hand, is that roles with the organization who's building solution is carrying and understanding? What it means is, I was in a recent conversation where one said, "Hey, I just taking this AI solution from vendors. So who's accountable? Is the vendor when AI goes wrong, or I when AI goes wrong?" So I said, "Of course you are," and So I think those level of clarity and mechanism to build accountability framework is evolving, and I think is completely will go to organizations there what their risk assessment framework is, towards evaluating vendor-led solutions towards AI, and how those solutions is exposing consumer data or fulfilling data subject right, individual right towards maintaining, level of protection, level of data safeguard which is required. Now, another aspect is there is a lot of effort required towards the developers who is building the solutions, and I think that aspect is missing. Where we skill set and developers, where they need to be designed and assessed towards an effective risk assessment framework of entire life cycle, whether the development stage, requirement getting stage, whether the deployment stage and monitoring stage, where all this privacy requirement has to be assessed and assured data which is moving, data which is collected, whether it's a training data, whether it's synthetic data, nowadays a lot of term which is introduced towards AI solutions has to be compliant. Now, Debbie, I was assessing one of the solution is now. So what happening is when you look at the solution, how those privacy principle from the design stage has been embedded. Now, the understanding still the world has is since there's no law, so nothing applies to us, right? But the fundamental question is no, still existing privacy regulation is applies to you as long as you're processing personal data, you know. So I think we are gearing up towards that. We are building those awareness, those culture. I think that will again come to your question is how the accountability is getting built it. And so the end objective is how do we build a solution which is give trust to our customer where the data is protected, your data we are complying with regulations, you are safe, your consumer data is safe. So I think that's the tagline.
I want your thoughts on a statement that I hear people say all the time. And now it's like fingers on a chalkboard for me, but I want your thoughts. So I've heard people say in relation to AI that technology is not good or bad, that it just depends on how it's used. And I just don't think that's true with AI because humans build these systems. It could be a black box, there could be bias, there could be discrimination, things in there. The systems are making inferences, right? Maybe things you didn't say is making inferences there. So I think when you say the technology can't be good or bad, you're basically saying, well, it's not my fault if it does something bad. I don't know. I don't know what happened. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're right. This is still a, I would say, evolving area and is still in a gray stage. But then I think I always believe in fundamentals. So fundamentals still remain same, and world always catch up. So the solution is not to stop to the technology which is growing. I think approach should be that how quickly, how effectively, how as a balanced approach you can build your framework, your policy, your processes towards do whatever best you can. So I think your intent is play a key role. And I see a lot of organizations is trying to build those framework. There are a lot of initiatives. You see the Microsoft, whether Apple, whether it's ChatGPT itself is taking to make sure they don't get caught up into the any of the regulator eyes. And they had a good knock on the door from Ireland authorities. So I think they are taking seriously. But then again, there's another aspect is big players like Microsoft, Facebook, Apple will do whatever they can do. But then I think, what about the small scale companies? How they can invest such heavily in terms of making sure that they are compliant. How the solution which is getting built is still giving the confidence to the organization that they are doing what they are supposed to do. We have many examples with this AI solution going wrong, whether it's ChatGPT-led solutions or any other, because once it go wrong, it can create a lot of chaos. So as we continue to build those effort till the time we get a clear guidelines or clear standards coming out, how these new challenges regarding explainability, again, transparency, building these solutions. Again, data protection is where now the quantum of data has increased. And I'm wondering, Debbie, that I think the definition of personal data might evolve, where saying not just individual data now. I don't know the recent bill which is coming out to AI to in the US, whether it's a AI bill, whether New York bias bill, where they're continuously saying, okay, you have to have that audit towards the solution you're building towards the bias. But then, how effectively one can do, I don't know. Do you have any audit mechanism where the tool we can do the audit? I don't know. So yeah, let's see how it goes.
Yeah, I just did a webinar for the New York State Bar Association today about that, the New York AI audit bill and stuff like that. So I think what typically happens is, unfortunately, something bad happens and then a regulation comes out and they try to answer that bad thing that happened. So I think that's kind of what we're seeing. And I think what they're aiming to do is to create more transparency in these systems. I think that they're tired of calling CEOs to Capitol Hill and them say, I don't know what happened. And they're like, well, that's your job to know. We're going to put it in a law. So I think, like you said, accountability should be there, transparency should be there. And so they're not necessarily dictating how people do an audit. They're basically saying these elements need to be more transparent and you need to be able to show evidence that you've taken these steps and things like that. So I think that's what they're looking for. I think in hiring, I think that this is going to be a huge issue because I think that there probably is quite a bit of discrimination in there or bias in there. I know a lot of people who are, maybe older workers, and they're saying they're having a hard time finding jobs, right? They know age discrimination exists, but I think what some companies don't realize with these systems is that discrimination is probably in the code. So if you have these audits, the people suspect it will be there. So I think it's going to be very interesting. I'm hoping this will push more privacy by design because, and I want your thoughts on this. Like before, when people were talking about privacy by design, they were like, let's just do whatever. And they call privacy people later and put some band-aids on stuff. And it's like, no, it doesn't actually work that way. So are you seeing more of an effort to either have you be involved earlier in a process or having a situation where you're trying to create less risk downstream? Is that something that you're seeing more of?
Yes, the more and more attraction towards privacy from the design stage is growing right now. We see a lot of involvement of privacy team and privacy folks from the start, whether it's a new customer, whether you're in M&A, doing merger and acquisition, whether you're building new products and solutions, how those product and solution need to be aligned towards applied privacy principles and regulations. So those requirements are getting into the requirement stage. But I think still a lot of awareness needs to be created. And the fundamental challenge I see is again and the people issue, Debbie. This organization is willing to invest heavily building a skill set towards who can work closely with developers and align those privacy requirements, or awareness towards those developers where they understand privacy as a fundamental process where this has to be built from the requirement strategy. And which is very important is last bit is business. While business is justifying or creating and building those requirements, are they taking privacy as a core towards their design framework? So I think if I look at these three areas, so there are a lot of things has changed and evolved from last. I think one area where now customer is also asking where is his privacy is embedded in your solution and design, where organizations are seeking an onboarding privacy team and privacy champions towards their processes whenever there's a new client, a new customer, or new product need to be developed. So we are seeing now, but yes, still the long way to go. I would say where the structure has to be built very strongly, where privacy has to be looked at from the scratch, not as a post factor, where the solution is there. Now you please go ahead and do and assess.
Yeah, I think it's expensive and it's not helpful to try to do it at the end, right? Because you built in so many things that maybe shouldn't have been done in the first place.
Yes, right. I think with the privacy by design, I will touch upon a couple of things like more aspect towards consent management is also growing now. When you look at to inbuild any solution with a lot of data, especially with the AI or whether it's any digital solution which is being built, so expect of traceability of the data, who the data is belongs to, what all data volume which you are capturing, how the data will be used, and whose data is belong to. But I think a lot of awareness is growing towards consent management, and I've seen companies building a effective consent management framework also as well. You will surprised to hear. I don't know if you look at a chance to look at India Data Protection Act, which is recently passed. So consent management has been categorically defined there as one of the provisions to collect the data. And they also talk about having a dedicated consent manager on board it who will oversee consent management practices. So this is very, I would say, very appreciable steps which they have taken, because managing consent life cycle itself is a very challenging job, right? And building those consent life cycle towards your entire organization ecosystem it should be done at the base level, so that you know what data you have and who and data belongs to who. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's definitely, especially in APAC, there's definitely a move, or even in like Saudi Arabia, different things like that, definitely a move towards consent, right? Because in some of those countries, consent is the only way that you can get certain data, right? So I remember this is around the time the GDPR came out. I went to a webinar. It was like in person session, and one of the lawyers on the panel, he's like, "Consent is impossible. That's impossible." We can't do that. In the past, where companies, so much of what they were doing was considered quote unquote performance of a contract, legitimate interest. We know that as data has grown, companies have done other little business deals and are doing other things with data that people didn't want them to do. And so that's what I think a lot of these laws are for. They're responding to that. So it isn't impossible, but it is difficult, right? Because technology and software tips or data systems are typically built to remember, not to forget data. So you're basically swimming upstream when you're trying to get to a situation where, okay, someone gave me data, now I have to get rid of it, or someone revoked their consent. So how do I do that? So what are your thoughts on that?
And so I think this goes towards building an entire consent life cycle, which has to be integrated with your consumer rights management workflow and process. Because so I look at it in three ways. One is, are you able to build a centralized mechanism where you have a central view, whatever data coming in your environment, okay, that is consented. Whether building those checkpoints and building the consent as a to the data collection point, those checkboxes, or whether it implementing such a capability, whether it's to ensure that any website collecting data in your organization is consent is one of the key requirements where there. Now, but other aspect is, are those consent mechanism is integrated with your consumer right flow, whether data subject right workflow, whether whether somebody is not consented or he's requesting some rights. Do you have a team or process who can handle those requests as an integrated way? And I see it lot of gaps where these two things doesn't talk to each other. Where you have a human resource department sitting there getting a request, but they're not talking to the Department of Privacy as a central time, sitting in the other part of the world. Then you have marketing, still a gray area, who do a lot of marketing campaign and collect data, and then they got request, hey, do not disturb me while I was sending my emails. But then they do not talk to. They have a mechanism where they can have an integrated process with the DSR or consent. But other aspect is awareness, which I keep repeatedly says that the more and more awareness we keep building towards these areas across organization, where they know, okay, something has to come, we have to, what do we do, where do we reach out, and who can help us to align with this. I have seen those touch point where things get missed out, where there someone sitting in Europe gets a request, hey, need my data, whether it's an applicant, and then you have a team sitting in the Philippines where they don't know what to do, and because they manage a DSR processes of workflow, and then those two people are not talking to each other. So HR is looking at is a normal BA process where they say, oh, okay, I don't know what to do. But then there's a team who need to align with the privacy requirement, whether how should we handle this request. So I think that's something that gap need to be bridged now. What's your thought?
Yeah, I totally agree. Right. Corporations, in my view, have been developed almost like Santa's workshop where everyone does their little part, right? And magically at the end, the toy pops out at the end. And when you have something like privacy, which is an issue that goes horizontally across organizations and almost any type of data that you're looking at possibly could have some type of regulation tied to it or some other type of obligation, it just becomes hard to maybe understand or to communicate to people what their responsibility is, who needs to do what, because I hear a lot of companies say, hey, we need a policy. We're going to write this policy. Yeah, we're going to do this. And like, okay, so who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? And they're like, well, we haven't thought about that yet. Right. So part of that, to me, part of compliance is doing, right? So it is action. It's not inaction. So if you're not doing action, then you're out of compliance, in my view. What are your thoughts?
Well, I have seen you have a policy sitting in some portal in the company, but then who is educating the policy? But then you have a central team, the central awareness program, but then you who's working closely with the business to know first what is there in the policy, and then telling business or telling department and team, hey, this is what you need to do. Because I think the way I look at more and more, privacy will sit with business teams, operation team, IT team, your incident team, your marketing team, your HR team, which is very important, finance team, which is very important. I think the more you get more confidence towards how things are building up because it has to sit with them rather than sitting in some central place in a central different locations. So I think those entire chain of team structure need to still grow where privacy should be managed in a very localized and regional way rather than sitting in a top. So I think that something is growing, I would say.
Perfect. I agree with that. I don't want your thoughts. This is an executive question, executive advice. Let's say someone's a privacy person, maybe they're the only person, or maybe they're just a small group within an organization. How do they develop champions in different other divisions of a company that aren't in privacy? So, how do you reach out to HR or marketing or IT folks to try to get champions who can help you do your job? What are your thoughts?
So I think we are working in three-layer approach, rather I would say in a more generic way. So three-layer approach is one is you build your core privacy team who are very, very skilled, educated, trained on advanced privacy aspect of regulation understanding. But then second layer of is your train the trainer model. What it means is department spokes or point of contact, dedicated point of contact who understand their rules and responsibility toward data privacy. And they have a specialized continuous training and monitoring and awareness workshop through maybe a workshop, through various different channels, through maybe a regular connect in the forums who continuously need to be cascaded what is happening in the privacy world, what is coming up, what is growing, what regulation applies to you, and building those champion and giving the privacy in their hand. Now what it means is I fundamentally believe give them the charter that this is your business, this is your area, this is what applies to you, and you are responsible to drive it, right? So I think the way we are building this cross-functional aspect of culture where each kind of contact POC of that respective department, take this entire charter and drive the compliance towards. While we support them through different channels, through policy procedure, we support them through awareness training, we support them through hand holding, we support them through a lot of guidance. I think they take the charge and working with privacy team to ensure that the solution which they're building, the customer they're handling, and requirement they have for the customer is being fulfilled. And I think that also required working with legal compliance team and required working with HR, ID closely and build that thought within those departments and the why privacy is important for them and how their solution can be built and bring more trust to their customers. So I think that's three-layer approach I am trying to build as a culture.
That's a great approach. Thank you for that. Talk a little bit about privacy enhancing tech. So around the time when you were first building your first privacy program, I'm sure there was no privacy enhancing tech around. Now we're seeing more people, more companies in this space that are trying to work there. How has that changed over the years? Like, is this a good change? I would imagine it's a good change. What are your thoughts?
No, absolutely. It's a good change. And I think it's after the AI and the way digital solutions growing, technology towards privacy is enhancing. And when I say technology, there are a lot of solutions, vendor-led solutions and capability which is being built and enhanced towards how we implement data minimization principle, how do we implement purpose limitation principle of privacy with some technical capability. I always, there are a lot of terms now being used, which we never heard, and a lot of people don't have like federated learning, where you build a solution and try to build an AI solution where this capability helps you to minimize the data and ensure that your data which is being used for the purpose you have collected. There are a lot of concept which is now being developed. I heard ZKP is zero knowledge proof. What it does, it's evaluate your data and try to convert your data into the dummy data, and so that and then groupize it, and so that you don't work on actual data and don't have a so basically no knowledge of actual data in the dummy data. That's concept is getting built up, and yeah, there are a lot of other concept which is getting is differential privacy, how privacy needs to be embedded to cloud environment. So I think those solutions are getting up, but same time there is a greater understanding mechanism is need to require to deploy the solution, because there's no one fit for all size. So I think this solution works well when you use it in a combination of 2 or 3 together and then try to build your solution. I have not seen, at least in my view, where organizations are trying to build those and trying to adopt this privacy and technology very aggressively in terms of ensuring that towards their policy and procedure that one has to deploy this. But I think it's still maturing in my view.
Yeah, I think it's definitely maturing. I think there's always this push and pull thing that happens with new software in a new software area, right? Where some tools want to do everything, and then other tools, they're smart, they want to do best of breed. But what that means for a company is that you may have multiple solutions, right? Depending on what your issue is. So I think that's always a challenge. Like, should I get this thing that does 10 things, but it only does one thing really well and it does the other 9 things not that great? Or should I get the best in a particular category? So I feel like a lot of companies, a lot of times they don't know the right question to ask in order to get the right tool, right? So they think that they solved their problem, but then it's like, oh, this doesn't do what I thought it did. So they're back out into the marketplace trying to find something new. Definitely a learning curve there. And so I think what AI has done is really accelerate these conversations, where before I was like, oh, let's just wait and see. And then I was like, okay, AI is pushing on the door, trying to get in, and we're trying to keep it out, keep it out of different things, and this is not working. So hopefully this will start more conversations about privacy enhancing tech, but then also back to one of your earlier points, which I think is vital, is that the future data lineage will be that much more important, right? Who is the data from? Where'd you get it from? Who does it belong to? Can we track that data all the way through the data life cycle? And that's something that organizations never had to do. And I think that's going to be necessary in the future. What do you think?
Yeah, I think at this AI, one of the discussion which is involved now is privacy. Well, I will talk about the privacy team member or privacy skill set, second aspect, but then privacy is now moved to more is a data governance aspect where you need to look at not just privacy as a fundamental perspective, building those processes where data as a whole, where the ecosystem of data in company, and then building those data lineage practices towards all aligning those privacy principles in each life cycle. And I think with this cloud, where almost entire world is moving to the cloud now, so where now you have a good handhold on the data and where privacy has to be set by design towards cloud adoption and getting more visibility towards data. One of the that I've seen company implementing lot of data discovery and classification practice, which is first step towards getting very granular level visibility of your data in your environment, and which also helps to create a data map towards aligning, okay, where the data is coming from, where the data moving, how the data is cataloged within your entire cloud or on-prem environment. What is the category of data you have, what are the data elements you have, what is the age of data, what regulations applies towards the data. So I think, and what are the data protection policy you have with the baseline control, whether it's anonymization, whether it's de-identified, whether it's encryption. So I think that is one aspect. But rather than, I would also look at, well, you get the visibility of the data, but then what are you going to do about it? I have seen companies building those processes where how do we have a risk assurance aligning with your data governance practices so that you know, okay, after getting the visibility, we have a effective risk management in place to work hand in hand with this data governance practice.
I think one, you mentioned the business, and it's very important. So I think some people, they have a religious idea of privacy, and I'm just not one of those people, right? I tell people you advise your company on what they should do. You help them put plans in place, but they have to decide. They have to decide their risk appetite. They have to decide how they want to implement. They have to decide what they want to purchase and things like that. So, what are your thoughts about that? Because I feel like some people are like, oh, unless they do everything my way, it's terrible. What are your thoughts?
No, I think you're absolutely right. Because if you look at privacy, the way it's evolved, uh, still you do not have any standard like information security, which can be fit in any organization and any country across the globe. You can have a lot of ISO standard information security management system you just adopt. But in privacy, the way it is evolved, where West side, GDPR, US, they have very stringent, complex set of principle and requirement, where the other countries, to the US side, they have it sort of, while they try to get more aligned with GDPR, but then they have sort of different aspect coming up. When you look at the Asia side of it and China side of it, they are again aligning very culturally with privacy. So I think it's very important when the foundation of the privacy has built towards the culture of that country, then implementation of the privacy has to be built with the culture of the company, right? And of the organization. So effective risk appetite framework and process has to be developed. Like I always tell whomsoever I speak. So privacy has leader or privacy team is work hands on hand with different departments, telling them why it's important, what is the risk associated with this, and then leave it there. Let them take the decision, let them take the call. How do they want to go about it? And I think more we work towards more of a advisor, work towards more of a consultant, work towards more of a helping hand towards implementing those practices and solution. Yeah, so that's why I look at privacy team or privacy should be structured. I'll tell you, with a multinational company, like we have a Philippines office where there is a dedicated team sitting in privacy, where they also are very, very mature and understand privacy. Somebody who has an office in India where the privacy is still not gained that much importance the way compared to Philippines and in the Europe, where they will look at privacy as a okay, still third point rather than first point, or third priority rather than first priority. So I think so that's level of cultural understanding towards organization is still very important if you want to drive an effective privacy program within your company.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. So if it were the world, according to you, Vivek, and we did everything you said, what would be your wish for privacy anywhere in the world? So whether that be regulation, human behavior, technology, what are your thoughts?
I think over the past few years, privacy has grown a lot. It has grown a lot. I can't imagine now if I look at around 70% of the world population is protected. With the India law passed, I would say the 90%. So where now at least people have the right. People have individual has gaining more importance. Okay, my data values to me, and I have the right to know what's happening towards my data. And then I think I always say to everyone that you need to look at from the individual perspective. Then only you can build effective data privacy program. End of the day, individual is our customer. This is what we are protecting. So it is evolving, and I think with the latest growing technologies, with the digital solutions, AI tomorrow will be something else. Like now we have a chat GPT, but I think fundamentally we will be having a balancing approach towards meeting and we keep building those frameworks and ensuring that yes, we are serving a customer and have those processes in place which bring more confidence to our customer and individual to whom we are serving.
That's a great wish. That's a great wish. Well, you definitely have your head on right. You're very level-headed and pragmatic about the way that you approach privacy, and I'm really happy that you were able to be on the show. It was great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been a great episode. And yeah, I'm looking forward for us to be able to collaborate again sometime soon.
Thank you. It was nice to meet you part of this session today, Debbie, and look forward for more connects.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I'll talk to you soon.
Sure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.